Hello everyone, and welcome to my Bold and Beautiful for You channel. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. The air in this cell is thick, a stagnant cocktail of industrial-grade cleaner, stale sweat, and despair. A single, caged fluorescent light in the corridor outside throws a grid of shadows across Luna's face, making her look both younger and infinitely older than her years. She sits on the edge of her thin, government-issue mattress, postured deceptively calm, but her fingers are a whirlwind of activity, meticulously braiding and unbraiding a loose thread she's picked from her standard-issue gray blanket. This isn't the frantic panic of a cornered animal, this is the focused, hummingbird-like intensity of a mind operating at maximum capacity. Every detail of the plan, a Rube Goldberg machine of human manipulation and precise timing, runs on a continuous loop behind her eyes. It's a perfect, beautiful, terrifying thing, and its architect is a man she's never actually met face-to-face, Poe Larson. His name, whispered to her through a series of encrypted, self-destructing messages delivered via a corrupt guard who only responds to the smell of cash, had been her first flicker of real hope in this concrete tomb. Larson isn't a friend, he's a phantom, a strategist for hire who specializes in logistical reassessments for the unjustly incarcerated, as his initial, cryptic note had phrased it. His fee was astronomical, a number that made her breath hitch even in memory, but it was a bill to be paid on the outside, a testament to his supreme confidence. The plan, Operation Chameleon, as Larson had grandly dubbed it, was a masterpiece of psychological warfare and bureaucratic sleight of hand, all predicated on a single, exploitable flaw in the system: the county's overworked, understaffed, and chronically bored medical contractor. Luna's role was to play the consummate actress, to become a living, breathing medical textbook case. For the past 3 weeks, under Larson's meticulous direction, she had been meticulously constructing a persona of debilitating illness. It began with subtle complaints of dizziness and blurred vision during her hourly checks, complaints logged by indifferent guards. She then graduated to refusing meals, claiming severe nausea, making sure to be seen dry heaving into her cell's stainless steel toilet by the right correctional officer at the right time. She drank just enough water to stay functional but let her skin grow pale and clammy. She practiced a slight, persistent tremor in her left hand until it became an unconscious tic. She was building a case file, brick by bureaucratic brick, for a medical emergency that didn't exist. The crescendo of this performance was scheduled for tonight. At 2:17 a.m., precisely, she was to trigger the final phase. Larson had provided her, via the same greased palm guard, with a small, gelatin capsule containing a potent but short-lived emetic. It was a calculated risk, the illness would be violently, undeniably real, but its effects would fade within 2 hours, leaving no trace in her system for a subsequent toxicology report. The timing was everything. The graveyard shift at the jail was skeletal, and the on-call transport medic, a man named Garrett, had been thoroughly vetted and, according to Larson's intelligence, was susceptible to financial persuasion. Garrett wasn't part of the escape itself, he was merely a pawn, a conduit. His role was to assess Luna, find her vitals alarming, and follow the standard protocol, recommend immediate transfer to the County General Hospital's secure ward for evaluation. He would do this not out of malice, but because Larson had provided him with a compelling, and entirely falsified, page from Luna's medical file, suggesting a rare cardiac arrhythmia that could be triggered by severe electrolyte imbalance, making the transfer seem not just prudent, but medically necessary. Garrett was, in effect, being manipulated into doing his job too well. The escape wouldn't happen in the jail, nor during the transport. Larson had been explicit: the system is a series of locked doors. We don't break the doors, we convince the key holders to open them for us. The weak point was the handoff at the hospital. County General was a sprawling, chaotic maze, and its secure psychiatric intake unit was perpetually overwhelmed. The 2 sheriff's deputies assigned to escort her from the ambulance bay to the 7th floor ward would be tired, complacent, and likely more concerned about their next coffee break than a pale, trembling woman in restraints who had, until minutes before, been violently ill. They would follow procedure, which involved wheeling her on a gurney through a series of service corridors and a dedicated, keycard access elevator. It was in the basement corridor, during the 30-second journey between the elevator and the intake desk, that the landscape would shift. Larson had a man on the inside, a janitor named Hector, whose crippling gambling debts had made him exceptionally open-minded about a one-time, high-paying logistical support role. Hector's task was deceptively simple. At 3:45 a.m., he would prop open a fire exit door leading to a loading dock with a wooden wedge, and, crucially, he would trigger a small, smoky electrical fire in a utility closet 2 corridors over. Not a real, dangerous fire, but one that would produce enough smoke to set off a localized alarm, creating confusion, drawing personnel, and, most importantly, causing a momentary diversion. In that window of chaos, lasting no more than 90 seconds, Luna would make her move. The deputies, hearing the alarm and smelling smoke, would instinctively be torn between their duty to their prisoner and the base human impulse to assess the potential danger. In that moment of hesitation, Luna, feigning a renewed wave of nausea, would lurch from the gurney. The plan wasn't for her to overpower them, it was to use their own training against them. They would see a sick, unsteady woman, not a fleeing fugitive. Their first instinct would be to grab her, to restrain her, not to draw their weapons. And in that scrum of bodies, as they tried to control her, she would slip the lightweight, plastic flex cuffs they used for transport, cuffs that Larson had assured her were vulnerable to a specific, sharp, twisting motion he had detailed in his instructions. Once free, her flight would be a short, desperate sprint down the smoke-filled hallway, through the propped-open fire door, and out into the cool, free air of the loading dock. And waiting there, idling behind a dumpster with its lights off, would be the final piece of Larson's puzzle, a vehicle. Not a sleek, black SUV favored by spies in movies, but something utterly anonymous, a decade-old, beige Toyota Camry with a slightly dented fender, the kind of car that was functionally invisible on the streets of Los Angeles. The driver would be another ghost, a man known only as the ferryman, whose sole job was to drive, without speaking, to a prearranged location, a self-storage facility in the San Fernando Valley. There, in a rented, climate-controlled unit, Larson had prepared a go-bag, new identification, a burner phone, a modest amount of untraceable cash, a change of clothes, and a set of keys to another, equally anonymous vehicle parked several blocks away. From that moment on, Luna would be on her own. Larson's involvement, and his profit, ended the second the ferryman drove away. The gelatin capsule hit the back of her throat, a slick, foreign pill of promise and peril. She dry swallowed, the motion feeling like a final, irrevocable commitment. For a moment, nothing. Then, a slow, creeping heat unfurled in her stomach, a chemical blossom of impending violence. Larson's instructions had been chillingly precise: do not fight it. The more authentic the distress, the less scrutiny you will receive. Vomit is a powerful argument that requires no translation. She leaned forward, elbows on her knees, and focused on the grout lines between the concrete floor tiles, counting backwards from 100. At 73, a violent, sour cramp seized her abdomen. At 51, a wave of dizzying nausea made the shadows in the cell swim. She stumbled to the stainless steel toilet bowl, her body convulsing in a series of ragged, unproductive heaves before finally, spectacularly, voiding the meager contents of her stomach. The sound, raw and distressing, was her cue. She reached a trembling hand towards the emergency call button mounted by the cell door, but didn't press it yet. Timing, Larson's voice echoed in her mind, is the scaffold upon which all great deceptions are built. Let the performance speak for itself first. She allowed herself a second, louder retch, followed by a pathetic, whimpering moan that was only half feigned. The physical misery was very, very real. She slumped against the cold wall, her forehead beaded with a clammy, genuine sweat, and then she slammed the heel of her hand against the call button, holding it down. It took 90 seconds, she counted each one with the frantic thump of her heart, for heavy, unhurried footsteps to approach. A flashlight beam cut through the narrow safety glass window, scanning the cell before landing on her crumpled form. "What's the problem, number 73842, aboard?" female voice asked. It was Officer Jansen, the one Luna had pegged as cynical but not cruel. I can't see straight," Luna slurred, letting her head loll back against the wall. Everything's spinning. My chest, it feels tight. She manufactured a convincing gasp for air, a trick she'd practiced by hyperventilating for a few seconds and then speaking. I think I'm having a heart attack. Jansen's sigh was audible even through the reinforced steel door. You and every other inmate after lockdown. You ate your dinner? Couldn't, Luna whispered, squeezing her eyes shut as another wave of nausea, this one genuine from the pill, racked her frame. Please. The flashlight beam lingered on her face for a long moment. Luna could almost hear the internal calculation, the hassle of paperwork for a faker versus the career-ending disaster of ignoring a genuine medical crisis. With a grunt of annoyance, Jansen keyed her radio. Control, this is Jansen on B block. I've got a 73842, female, presenting with severe nausea, dizziness, and complaints of chest pain. Requesting medical assessment. Over. The response was crackled and immediate. Copy that, Jansen. Logging the call. Medic is en route from intake. ETA 10 minutes. The next 10 minutes were an eternity of sustained performance. Luna allowed her body to go limp, sliding from the wall to the cold floor, a pose of utter helplessness. She focused on keeping her breathing shallow and rapid, and let the fine tremor in her hand spread to a full-body shiver. When the medic, Garrett, arrived with a kit and a digital tablet, his expression was one of professional detachment. He took her vitals, blood pressure, oxygen saturation, pulse. Luna had practiced a form of biofeedback for weeks, using meditation techniques Larson had detailed to slightly elevate her heart rate on command. It wasn't much, but combined with her genuine pallor and the physical stress of the emetic, it was enough to push the numbers into the concerning range. Blood pressure's low. Pulse is thready and elevated, Garrett muttered to Jansen, shining a penlight into Luna's eyes. Pupils are reactive. Any history of cardiac issues? Not in her file, Jansen replied, arms crossed. Garrett scrolled through the tablet, but Luna knew what he was seeing. Larson's adjusted file, a digital ghost that had been seamlessly inserted into the county's overburdened server, would now be prominent. Garrett's brow furrowed. Huh. Notes here from a prior physical, flags a potential familial predisposition to long QT syndrome. Can be triggered by electrolyte imbalance from vomiting. He looked from the tablet to Luna, his professional skepticism now warring with a manufactured medical red flag. It was the perfect nudge. Protocol is clear. With these symptoms and this flag, she needs an EKG and blood work we can't do here. I'm recommending immediate transfer to county. General. The bureaucratic machine groaned to life. Paperwork was printed, a transfer order was signed by the shift commander. Luna was lifted onto a gurney, her wrists and ankles secured with the familiar, brittle plastic flex cuffs. The ride in the windowless prison transport van was a blur of streetlights and motion, each turn bringing her closer to the nexus of the plan. She kept her eyes closed, conserving her energy, playing the frail invalid. The ambulance bay at County General was a cacophony of controlled chaos, just as Larson had predicted. The handoff to the two sheriff's deputies was perfunctory. They were exactly as described, one older, with a weary paunch and the 1,000-yard stare of a man counting the days to his pension, the other, younger, trying to project an authority he didn't yet feel. They wheeled her gurney off the van, the older deputy grumbling about another junkie faking for a fix. They didn't see a threat, they saw an administrative chore. The journey through the sterile, brightly lit corridors was a study in institutional indifference. The keycard access elevator hummed its ascent to the 7th floor. Luna's senses were on a razor's edge, hyper-aware of every detail. The flicker of the fluorescent lights, the distant, tinny sound of a hospital PA system, the smell of antiseptic and floor wax. Then, as the elevator doors slid open on the 7th floor, she heard it, the first, faint, insistent blare of a fire alarm. A moment later, the sharp, acrid scent of burning plastic and wiring hit her nostrils. Hector. He'd come through. Ah, hell. Not a drill, the older deputy sighed, his hand going to his radio. Smoke, thin and gray, began to seep from a vent down the hallway. The controlled chaos instantly escalated into genuine confusion. A voice shouted, "Code Red, West Wing basement. All personnel, check your areas." Nurses and orderlies began moving with purpose, their focus shifting from their duties to the potential emergency. This was the moment. The 90-second window. The deputies hesitated, the gurney stalled in the corridor. The younger one looked towards the source of the smoke, his hand on his belt. The older one tightened his grip on the gurney. Luna chose that exact second to convulse. She didn't just lurch, she threw her entire body into a violent, gagging spasm, rolling off the gurney and onto the linoleum floor with a jarring thud. It was a risky move, but it played directly into their training. They saw a medical crisis, not an escape attempt. "Damn it, she's seizing," the younger deputy yelled, diving to grab her shoulders. As they both bent over her, their world narrowed to the task of controlling a sick, thrashing inmate. Their faces were close, their attention completely on restraining her flailing limbs. Luna, meanwhile, had her hands tucked tight against her body. As the older deputy fumbled for a new set of cuffs, she executed the maneuver Larson had diagrammed for her. She took a sharp, deep breath, expanding her chest, and simultaneously twisted her wrists in opposite directions with a brutal, sudden torque. There was a distinct snap as the plastic seam of the flex cuff gave way. The feeling of her hands coming free was electric. There was no time for triumph. As the younger deputy's eyes widened in shock, she didn't punch or kick. She shoved, putting all her weight into a push that sent the older deputy stumbling back into the younger one, creating a precious second of tangled confusion. She scrambled to her feet, her legs wobbly but functional, and ran. She didn't look back. She followed the smoke, a ghost in a gray jumpsuit, sprinting down the hallway as shouts and alarms erupted behind her. Left at the water fountain, straight past the abandoned dietary cart, right at the double doors marked "Authorized Personnel Only." Larson's directions were a map burned into her brain. And there it was, the fire exit, propped open by a simple wooden wedge, a sliver of dark, free night visible beyond. She burst through the door, the cool Los Angeles air hitting her face like a physical blow, and stumbled onto the deserted loading dock. Her eyes scanned the shadows, her heart hammering against her ribs. Where is it? For a terrifying 3 seconds, she saw nothing but dumpsters and discarded pallets. Then, with a soft, almost imperceptible purr, the beige Toyota Camry rolled forward from behind a large industrial waste bin, its passenger door already swinging open. She didn't hesitate. She dove inside, the door slammed shut, and the car pulled away with a smooth, unhurried acceleration that was far more terrifying than a screeching tire ever could be. The ferryman said nothing. He was a silhouette, a cap pulled low over his brow. He drove with an almost preternatural calm, merging into the sparse 4 a.m. traffic as if he were just another commuter starting an early day. Luna sat in the passenger seat, trembling uncontrollably, the adrenaline crash leaving her hollow and shaking. She watched the city slide by, a world she had been severed from for months, now rushing back in a blur of light and motion. They drove in silence for 20 minutes, until they pulled into the lot of a 24-hour self-storage facility, its facade bathed in the harsh glow of orange sodium lights. The ferryman stopped the car, pointed a single, gloved finger towards a specific unit, B-17, and then, without a word, he looked straight ahead, his role complete. Luna got out. The Camry drove away, its taillights disappearing around a corner, leaving her alone in the vast, silent lot. She approached the roll-up door of Unit B-17. Taped to the bottom, just as described, was a single key. Her hands were still shaking so badly she could barely fit it into the lock. She hauled the door up just enough to slide underneath, and it closed behind her with a heavy, final clang. The unit was small, about the size of her former cell, but it contained a different kind of universe. A single, battery-powered lantern sat on a cardboard box, illuminating its contents. The go-bag was a high-quality hiking backpack. She unzipped it with frantic fingers. Inside, she found everything Larson had promised: jeans, a plain black t-shirt, a hoodie, socks, and underwear. A wallet containing a California driver's license with her photo but the name Leah Rodriguez, a social security card, and $500 in mixed bills. A prepaid burner phone, already charged. A set of keys with a fob for a nearby parking garage. And, at the very bottom, a single, unmarked envelope. She tore it open. Inside was not a note, but a photograph. It was a recent, telephoto lens shot of her mother, sitting at a cafe, reading a newspaper, looking safe and unaware. On the back, in a precise, typeset font, were 2 words, account settled. Larson was gone from her life as suddenly as he had entered it. The plan, in all its perfect, cold, and ruthless detail, was complete. She was out. She was free. But as she sat there on the cold concrete floor, clutching the photo of her mother, Luna knew with a chilling certainty that this was not an ending. It was merely the end of the prologue. The world outside these walls was a different kind of prison, and her escape from one system had just made her a permanent fugitive in another. The real bold and beautiful, and terrifying, struggle was just beginning.